I never thought this would happen to me. You hear these stories, you read about them online, but you never expect to find yourself in one. My name is Jake, and I'm just an ordinary guy with a pretty ordinary life. I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for about 5 years now. We met in college, fell in love, and eventually tied the knot in a small ceremony surrounded by friends and family. It was supposed to be the start of our forever, but it turned into something much darker. It all started out innocently enough. Life was busy and we both had jobs that demanded a lot of our time. But I noticed changes in Sarah. Little things at first. She became more distant. She was glued to her phone all the time, and when I asked about it, she brushed me off, saying it was just work emails or group chats with her friends. But her reluctance to share anything about her day began to create a rift between us. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that it was just the stress of adult life. But deep down, a nagging feeling began to grow. Then there was the night I went out with a couple of buddies from work. We had a few drinks and ended up at a bar near our house. As fate would have it, I swiped through Tinder while waiting for my friends to arrive. I didn't think much of it. My intention was never to cheat or even meet anyone. It was more of a game, a boredom buster. But then I saw her face. There was Sarah, my wife, smiling brightly at me from the screen, except she was using a different name, Emma. At first I thought it was a cruel joke, some kind of sick social experiment. I swiped left and right a few times, hoping this was a glitch or a bad filter. But there she was, an entirely different name, and I could still recognize the familiar contours of her face. My heart raced as I wrestled with what this meant. Was this a sign of something more sinister? Was she actually looking for someone else? I felt sick. I downed a drink to steady my nerves and frantically tried to piece together the puzzle. How could she do this? We shared everything, our home, our lives, our dreams for the future. Yet here she was trying to connect with strangers on a dating app. I decided then and there that I had to confront her. I couldn't let this go unanswered, nor could I do it via text or phone call. It needed to happen face to face. That evening I arrived home earlier than usual, my mind racing with questions and anger. I decided to put on a brave face, but inside I was a tornado of emotions. When Sarah walked in, she was cheerful, asking about my day, even suggesting we have a nice dinner together. It was torture pretending everything was fine while I was sitting on this bombshell that could blow up our entire life. After dinner, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. I chose my words carefully, my voice steady but filled with an underlying current of rage. "So I saw you on Tinder today," I said, watching her expression shift from confusion to shock to something I couldn't quite place. "What are you talking about?" She stammered, trying to feign innocence. I pulled out my phone and showed her the app, her face on the screen with her new name boldly displayed. "Emma, is that what you call yourself now?" I asked, my voice rising involuntarily. Her reaction was immediate. She laughed, a harsh, almost mocking sound. "You don't get it, do you? It's just a silly app. I wasn't serious, Jake. I didn't think you'd find out." She had this look on her face, one that said she was enjoying my pain, feeding off my confusion. The air thickened with tension as I pressed her for more answers, her excuses growing more elaborate and ridiculous with each passing minute. I stood there, heart pounding, fuming as she painted herself as the innocent party. She claimed she was just looking for fun, that it had nothing to do with me or our marriage. But couldn't she see how much she was hurting me? How could she treat it so lightly? The realization that my wife, the woman I loved, was willing to betray me so casually shattered something deep inside me. I had hoped for a moment of honesty, some acknowledgement of the damage she was causing, but all I got was deflection and lies. At that moment, I knew I couldn't stay. I felt a rush of clarity amidst all the chaos. I had tried to reason and talk, but this wasn't a situation that required conversation. It needed resolution. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the kitchen, her laughter echoing hollowly in the background. I couldn't look back, I wouldn't. This was just the beginning of a long road ahead, filled with pain, confusion, and a thirst for revenge I never thought I'd experience. As I stepped out of the house, I realized I had a choice to make. I had to reclaim my life. After walking out on Sarah, I found myself standing on the front steps of our house, the night air wrapping around me like a shroud. My mind raced as I paced back and forth, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I was bewildered. I had never imagined my life would take a turn like this. I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak, and I was completely unprepared for the emotional roller coaster ahead. I took a deep breath and stepped away from the house, needing time to clear my head. I drove around aimlessly, not really knowing where I was headed. The streets felt strangely foreign, like I was seeing them for the first time. I ended up at the park where we used to walk together, reminiscing about those carefree days before the weight of adult life descended upon us. It had always been our happy place, but now it only served as a reminder of everything I had lost. With the sun long gone, I parked the car and took a moment to collect my thoughts. I couldn't just sit back and let this betrayal slide. I had to do something. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wanted a bit of payback, not just for her infidelity, but for how she had disrespected our marriage and our life together. I wasn't looking for any grand schemes or elaborate plots. I just wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences. I began to craft a plan, slowly piecing together the details as I drove home. First, I needed to gather evidence. I had to know exactly how deep this betrayal ran. I felt a certain satisfaction at the thought of turning the tables on her, of making her experience even a fraction of the hurt she had inflicted on me. The next day I took a personal day off work. I knew I had to tread carefully as I didn't want to arouse any suspicion. I spent the morning gathering information. I logged into social media, hopping to find something, anything, that would give me a glimpse into her double life. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just a simple Tinder match. Throughout the day, I looked for telltale signs of Sarah's infidelity. I went through her social media profiles, checking for any new friends or suspicious messages. I pored over her texts, sifting through conversations that seemed innocent enough until I found one that sent a chill down my spine. There it was, a message from a guy named Mike, someone I didn't recognize. They had been texting frequently, and the tone was flirtatious, filled with inside jokes that made my stomach churn. I felt the anger bubbling back to the surface as I read through their exchanges. I was sickened, not only by the betrayal but by the sheer audacity Sarah had to think I wouldn't find out. I remember my hands trembling as I took screenshots of their conversations, compiling evidence like a detective trying to solve a case. It began to feel less like heartbreak and more like a mission, a quest for justice. That afternoon, I decided to confront the situation head-on. I made a plan to set up a casual dinner with Sarah. She had no idea what was coming. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to let her guard down before I dropped the truth bomb on her. I reserved a table at a local restaurant, one we had visited countless times. The familiarity of it all felt eerie now, like a haunting echo of our shared past. When the evening came, I arrived early to collect my thoughts. I ordered a drink and waited for her to arrive, my heart pounding in anticipation. I could visualize the moment she walked in, her smile lighting up her face as she greeted me. But tonight was going to be different. Tonight, I would reveal the truth behind her lies. When Sarah finally walked through the door, she looked radiant, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. She kissed me on the cheek, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the affection I once had for her, but I quickly suppressed it. This was not the time for nostalgia. As we chatted over dinner, making small talk about our day, I could feel the tension building inside me. I needed to strike while the iron was hot, and as she laughed at one of my jokes, I decided to drop the bombshell. "So how's Mike?" I asked casually, watching her expression morph from amusement to confusion. Her fork clattered against her plate, and for a split second I saw panic flash across her face. "What do you mean?" she stammered, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a nervous tick than genuine amusement. "Don't play coy with me, Sarah. I saw you on Tinder using a fake name, Emma, and I've seen the texts between you and Mike. Don't lie to me." My voice was steady, but inside I felt like I was unraveling. The color drained from her face as her facade crumbled. She stammered out excuses, claiming it was just a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. "Jake, come on, it was just a stupid app. I didn't think you'd ever find out." The desperation in her voice was palpable, but all I could feel was a sense of power rising within me. I didn't let her off the hook that easily. I confronted her with every detail I had discovered, the texts, the flirtations, everything. I wanted her to see how deeply she had hurt me, how her actions were not just a slap in the face but a full-on betrayal of our marriage. She attempted to defend herself, to paint me as the bad guy for having the audacity to look through her phone, but I was done listening. As we sat there, the atmosphere heavy with tension, I realized this was more than just a moment of confrontation. It was a turning point. I was ready to take the reins of my life back, to reclaim the dignity she had stripped away from me. I had no intention of letting her walk away scot-free from this. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. The shocked look on her face became ingrained in my memory. I listened as she sputtered her excuses and managed to squeeze out a few tears, but it was all too late. I felt a rush of resolve wash over me. As I realized I was no longer just a victim in this scenario, I was ready to take action, ready to make sure that she felt the repercussions of her actions. The emotional journey was far from over, but I had set my course. I was determined to make sure she understood the gravity of her betrayal. The dinner ended in a way I hadn't anticipated. Sarah's tears flowed freely at first, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But the longer she tried to explain away her actions, the more my heart hardened. Her excuses felt like cheap words thrown into the air, desperate attempts to wriggle out of accountability. I wasn't going to play the part of the forgiving husband just because she was upset. No, I had bigger plans. After what felt like an eternity of back and forth, I finally made my decision. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor, and looked her dead in the eye. "I'm done, Sarah. This isn't just a stupid mistake. You've betrayed me. You've shattered everything we built together. I won't stick around for you to lie to me again." Her face fell, an expression of disbelief washing over her. "Jake, please, you can't be serious. I love you. It was just a phase, a bad decision. I'll make it right." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. I had made up my mind, and it felt liberating. I left the restaurant, my heart pounding not from sadness but from the adrenaline coursing through me. I could feel the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders as I walked out into the cool night air. I didn't want to go home, not yet. I needed a plan, a way to execute my revenge while also gathering my thoughts. I drove to my friend Mike's place, someone who had always been my sounding board, and parked outside for a moment. It was time to unload this burden. As I recounted the details of the night to Mike, he listened intently, his brows furrowing in disbelief. "Dude, that's messed up. She really thought she could get away with that." I nodded, feeling the anger boil back to the surface as I described the texts, the lies, and the way she had dismissed my feelings. "Look, Jake," Mike said, leaning forward, "you deserve better. You can't let her walk away from this without consequences. You need to show her what it really means to betray someone." That was it. Those words ignited something in me. I needed to make Sarah understand the depth of her betrayal, not just for me, but for the integrity of our relationship that she had so carelessly ripped apart. I spent the night crafting a plan, with Mike's help, brainstorming ways to expose Sarah for what she truly was, and to instill a sense of remorse that would linger long after the dust had settled. The next day, I returned home early, my heart racing with anticipation. I knew Sarah would be at work, and I was eager to gather more evidence while I still had the time. I entered our home, which felt more like a battlefield now than a sanctuary. I headed straight to her laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I logged into her social media accounts. What I discovered was even more damning than I had anticipated. Sarah had not only been communicating with Mike but with several other men as well. I found flirty messages, plans to meet up, and even a couple of photos she had sent that made my stomach churn. My anger intensified as I pieced together the extent of her infidelity. It was clear now that this was not just a brief fling. It was a full-blown affair. I felt a surge of vindication as I saved screenshots of everything, knowing this evidence would come into play later. As I scrolled through her conversations, my mind raced with ideas on how to reveal the truth to her, how to ensure she felt the weight of her actions. I wanted her to understand that what she did wasn't just a moment of poor judgment. It was a betrayal that affected the very foundation of our lives together. The plan began to take shape in my mind. I'd wait for the perfect moment to confront her again, to lay everything out before her. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about empowerment, taking control of a situation that had spiraled out of my hands. That evening, I waited for Sarah to return home. My heart was a steady drumbeat of anticipation as I prepared myself for the confrontation. When she finally walked through the door, I could see the weariness in her eyes. She looked exhausted, and part of me almost felt bad for what was coming next. Almost. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, trying to sound casual. It was as if she didn't even remember what had happened just a couple of nights earlier. I stood up slowly and looked her square in the eyes. "We need to talk, Sarah." The weight of my words hung heavy in the air. I could see the color drain from her face as she realized this wasn't just another casual conversation. "I know about Mike," I said, watching her expression shift from confusion to fear. "I know about the others too, and I have proof." Her eyes widened and she opened her mouth to speak, but words failed her. I pulled out my phone and displayed the screenshots, watching her face contort with every revelation. "This isn't just about Tinder anymore, is it? You've been lying to me and you think you can just walk away from this without any consequences." "Jake, please," she pleaded. "You don't understand." I was confused. I didn't mean it like that. Her excuses were nothing but hollow echoes now. I felt a sense of calm wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Finally, she would see the impact of her choices. I laid it all out for her, highlighting every conversation, every betrayal. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, to understand that her actions had consequences beyond just the moment. "I deserve better than this," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going to be the fool who stands by while you play games. You've broken my trust and there's no coming back from that." The confrontation left Sarah visibly shaken. She tried to grasp for straws, to convince me that we could work through this, that I was overreacting. But within me, the fire was lit, and I wasn't going to douse it for anyone. As I stood there watching her, I realized that I had taken back my power. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance, but a man who refused to let someone else dictate my worth. I was ready to move forward, with or without her. It was time for Sarah to learn that her choices had real consequences. And I was more than willing to ensure she felt the sting of her betrayal. I told her that I needed space, to think, to breathe, to figure out my next move. I walked away from her, resolute in my decision to take control of my life. I was done with being the one who was hurt. Now it was time for her to face the music. After that confrontation, I felt a mix of liberation and anger surge through me. I had finally taken a stand, and while I was still reeling from the revelation of Sarah's infidelity, I knew one thing for certain. I was not going to let her get away with this without facing the consequences. I needed to execute my plan carefully, ensuring that Sarah understood what her betrayal really meant, not only for her but for everyone involved. In the days that followed, I turned into a man on a mission. I began laying the groundwork for my revenge. I decided to gather more evidence, not just for my own peace of mind, but to make sure Sarah was aware of the trail of lies she had spun around us. I started by reaching out to her friends, the ones she had convinced me were innocent bystanders in our relationship. I knew they had to have some insight, some clue about the secret life she was living. I contacted Jessica, one of Sarah's closest friends. We had always gotten along well, and I hoped she would be willing to open up. I invited her for coffee, casually steering the conversation toward Sarah. As we chatted, I kept the tone light, all the while gauging Jessica's reactions. "So, how's Sarah doing?" "He seems a bit off lately," I asked, feigning concern. Jessica hesitated, her expression shifting as she glanced around the cafe. Yes, I don't know, she's been busy with work and stuff." Her evasiveness raised my suspicions, yet I pressed on. "I just worry about her, you know. She's been acting strangely and it feels like she's hiding something." The words hung between us and I could see Jessica's discomfort growing. "Yeah, I get that," Jessica replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She did mention something about meeting up with a guy a few weeks ago. I thought it was just a coworker hangout, but my heart raced. This was the confirmation I needed. Do you know anything about who he is? I asked, my voice steady. Jessica looked around again, clearly uneasy. I don't think it's serious, Jake. I mean, she loves you, right? Her words felt like a feeble attempt to reassure both of us, but I could tell she was struggling with her own doubts. After that conversation, I dove deeper into my investigation. I started following Sarah, which felt both surreal and gratifying. I could see her routine unfold. She would leave for work, hit the gym, and sometimes meet up with friends. But I also noticed the little deviations. On one occasion, I followed her to a bar that wasn't on her usual route, my heart pounding as I parked a distance away and observed her through the window. There she was, laughing, leaning into a guy who was clearly not a friend. The anger that bubbled within me transformed into a cold determination. I snapped photos of the encounter, feeling a strange satisfaction as I documented her betrayal. I wanted evidence, a visual confirmation that she was living a double life while I was left in the dark. After a week of gathering information, it was time to put my plan into action. I decided to confront Sarah again, but this time I would do it in front of her friends. I wanted her to face the truth in a way that would leave no room for denial. I reached out to Jessica and a few others, inviting them all over for dinner. I made sure to keep the atmosphere casual, so Sarah wouldn't suspect anything until it was too late. The night arrived, and as I set the table and prepared dinner, I could feel the tension in the air. When Sarah walked in, she greeted our friends with her usual bubbly demeanor, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. I caught Jessica's eye, giving her a subtle nod, and she understood the weight of what was about to unfold. As we sat down to eat, I couldn't help but notice how cheerful Sarah seemed. She chatted animatedly, completely oblivious to the trap I had set. The laughter around the table felt genuine, yet I was acutely aware of the impending confrontation. After we cleared our plates, I decided it was time. "Hey, everyone, I wanted to bring something up," I began, my voice steady but tinged with a sense of urgency. "I've been doing some thinking about relationships and honesty, and I think it's important we all hold each other accountable." Sarah's smile faltered slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "What do you mean, Jake?" she asked, her tone shifting to one of concern. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the fallout. "Well, I found out that Sarah has been lying to all of us, and it's time we confront the truth. Sarah, I know about Mike." I pulled out my phone, displaying the evidence, the texts, the photos, the betrayal laid bare. Gasps filled the room, and I felt an electric charge in the air as everyone turned to Sarah, who sat frozen in her seat. You went through my phone." She stuttered, her face draining of color. "I had to know the truth, Sarah," I said, my voice unwavering. "You've been unfaithful, and it's time everyone knows what kind of person you really are." The reactions from our friends were mixed: shock, disbelief, and an uncomfortable tension that settled heavily over the table. Jessica looked horrified, while others exchanged glances, unsure of what to say. Sarah's defense mechanisms kicked in, and she attempted to spin her web of excuses again. "That was just a phase. It didn't mean anything," she pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. "Didn't mean anything," I echoed, my anger boiling over. "This isn't just a phase, Sarah. This is who you are. You've been lying to everyone, including me. You've shattered our marriage, and now everyone knows the truth." The tears fell freely from her cheeks, but this time I felt no sympathy. I watched as she tried to regain control of the narrative, but the damage was done. I wanted her to experience the weight of her actions, to feel the shame of being exposed in front of her friends. The confrontation escalated as she started to lash out, attempting to shift the blame back onto me. "You never pay attention to me. You've been so wrapped up in your own life that you didn't even notice me. This is all your fault," she shouted, her voice cracking, but I wouldn't let her manipulate the situation any longer. "No, Sarah, you made the choice to betray me. You chose to lie and deceive. This is on you." As our friends began to leave, the atmosphere was thick with tension. I could see the realization settling in for them. The woman they thought they knew was not who she appeared to be. The finality of the situation hit me in waves. I had not only confronted Sarah, but had also reclaimed my dignity in front of those who mattered to me. After everyone left, I turned to Sarah, who was still sitting at the table, her expression a mix of anger and devastation. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. I deserve better than this." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand, silencing her. "I'm done with the lies, Sarah. You've made your choices, and now I'm making mine. I need space to figure out what my next steps are." I felt a rush of strength wash over me, bolstered by the knowledge that I had taken control of my life again. I watched as Sarah gathered her things, her face a mixture of anger and regret. The sight of her leaving felt surreal, almost like I was watching a scene unfold in a movie rather than living it. As I closed the door behind her, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. I had stood my ground and made it clear that I wouldn't be a victim any longer. There was still a long road ahead, but I was ready to navigate it. This was a turning point, and I was determined to emerge from this experience not just whole, but stronger than before. I was ready to reclaim my life. In the days following Sarah's departure, I found myself in a strange state of limbo. It was a mix of relief and pain, freedom and uncertainty. I had never imagined I would be living alone at this stage of my life, but as I stood in our empty home, I could feel the weight of the past lifting, if only slightly. I had taken a significant step by confronting Sarah and exposing her deceit, but I knew I had a long way to go before I could fully heal. The first few nights were especially tough. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events over and over in my mind. I had friends and family who supported me, but I still felt a gnawing loneliness that was hard to shake. I started thinking about how I wanted my life to look moving forward. I didn't want to be consumed by anger or bitterness. I wanted to reclaim my happiness. I began to focus on myself, rediscovering hobbies and interests that I had neglected over the years. I started attending a local gym, finding solace in the physical exertion. I joined a few classes, kickboxing and yoga, both of which were far outside my comfort zone but proved to be therapeutic in their own ways. I found that pushing my body helped clear my mind, and with every drop of sweat, I felt a little lighter. I also decided to reach out to an old friend, Eric, from college. We had fallen out of touch over the years, but I remembered how much I enjoyed his company. When I called him, he was excited to hear from me and suggested we meet for drinks that weekend. I was hesitant at first, still adjusting to my new reality, but I knew I needed social interaction to help me move forward. That Saturday, I met Eric at a bar downtown. As soon as I walked in, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me. We used to spend countless nights in places like this, laughing and reminiscing about our college days. Eric was the same, charismatic, quick-witted, and effortlessly charming. He bought me a drink, and we quickly fell into conversation as if no time had passed. I opened up to him about what had happened with Sarah, and he listened intently, his expression shifting from concern to sympathy as I shared the details of the betrayal. "Man, I'm really sorry you had to go through that," he said, his brow furrowed. "You deserve so much better." As the night went on, I felt a sense of ease that I hadn't felt in a long time. Eric was a good friend, and he reminded me of who I was before the storm of my marriage swept me away. We talked about everything: life, career aspirations, and even relationships. I found myself laughing and enjoying the moment, something I had almost forgotten how to do. By the end of the night, I felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. For the first time since everything had gone down, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could rebuild my life. Maybe I could find happiness again, even if it took time. Over the next few weeks, I continued to lean on my support system. I went out with friends, participated in community events, and even took a trip to visit my family back home. Each experience helped me process the pain while reminding me of the life I wanted to reclaim. I was determined to emerge from this heartache as a stronger and more resilient person. But despite my progress, Sarah lingered in my mind. I knew I had to finalize things legally and emotionally. I reached out to a lawyer to discuss our options for divorce. The thought of formalizing the end of our marriage felt surreal, but I knew it was a necessary step. I didn't want to drag things out any longer. It was time to close that chapter and move forward. Working through the paperwork was emotionally draining. I had to revisit the memories, the moments we had shared, and the trust that had been shattered. Each time I signed a document or reviewed our assets, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I was finally taking control of my life, but it was bittersweet. Finally, the day came when I had to meet Sarah to sign the divorce papers. I felt a swirl of emotions as I entered the cafe where we had agreed to meet. Part of me wanted to unleash my anger, to tell her everything I felt, but I knew that wouldn't do me any good. I had to be dignified, to show her that I was moving on without her. When Sarah arrived, she looked different, slightly worn down but still trying to maintain an air of composure. I could see a hint of regret in her eyes, and for a fleeting moment I felt a pang of empathy, but I quickly reminded myself of the hurt she had caused. There was no space for sympathy when she had destroyed so much. We sat across from each other and I placed the documents on the table. "Let's get this over with," I said, my voice steady but lacking warmth. She nodded, her expression reflective as she took the papers and began to read through them. The silence was palpable as we both signed the documents. It felt surreal to be finalizing the end of our marriage in such a cold manner, but I was grateful for the opportunity to move forward. I could feel a weight lifting off my shoulders with each stroke of the pen. As we finished up, Sarah looked at me, her expression a mixture of sorrow and confusion. "Jake, I'm really sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I met her gaze, my heart steady. "I know you're sorry, but that doesn't change what happened. I need to focus on my future now. Can we at least be friends?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. I shook my head. "I can't do that, Sarah. I need to heal, and being friends isn't an option right now. Maybe one day, but not now." With that, we parted ways. As I stepped out of the cafe, I felt a rush of freedom. It was done. I had taken a significant step towards reclaiming my life. It was a bittersweet moment, but I finally felt like I was on the right path. In the days that followed, I allowed myself to grieve the loss of my marriage while also celebrating the newfound freedom I had. I started focusing on my future, setting goals for myself, both personally and professionally. I wanted to travel, to explore new places, and to meet new people. I was ready for a fresh start, and I was determined to make the most of it. I had learned so much through this painful experience. I understood now that life was unpredictable, that people were capable of betrayal, but I also learned that I had the power to rise above it. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. I was no longer defined by Sarah's choices. I was reclaiming my narrative, and I was excited to see where it would take me next. As the weeks turned into months, I began to settle into a new rhythm. The initial shock of the divorce faded, replaced by a sense of empowerment and anticipation. I had taken control of my life in a way I never thought possible, and even though the scars of betrayal still lingered, I was ready to embrace the journey ahead. I threw myself into my work, bringing a renewed focus and energy that had been absent during my tumultuous marriage. My career had always been important to me, but I had allowed my dedication to Sarah to overshadow my professional aspirations. Now, I was determined to climb the corporate ladder and make my mark. I sought out new projects, volunteered for leadership opportunities, and even started mentoring some newer employees. The satisfaction I derived from this newfound dedication was immense, and it helped to fill the void left by my marriage. In addition to work, I began to explore hobbies I had once loved. I picked up painting again, a passion I had set aside during my marriage. I found solace in the act of creating, letting my emotions flow onto the canvas. Each brushstroke felt like a cathartic release, a way to process the pain I had endured. I even joined a local art class, where I met some wonderful people who shared my passion for creativity. The connections I formed were genuine and refreshing, a stark contrast to the superficiality I had experienced with Sarah. I also ventured into the dating scene again, albeit cautiously. I joined a few dating apps, determined to find a connection that was built on honesty and mutual respect. It was a daunting experience at first, but I reminded myself that the past didn't have to dictate my future. I went on a few dates with different women, each experience teaching me something new about myself and what I truly wanted in a partner. One evening, I went out with a woman named Claire. We met through a mutual friend and hit it off immediately. Over dinner, I found myself laughing and engaging in conversation like I hadn't in years. There was an effortless chemistry between us, and I could feel the walls I had built around my heart starting to crumble. Claire was open, honest, and beautiful inside and out. She shared similar interests and values, and for the first time since the divorce, I felt a spark of hope for a future filled with love again. As our relationship blossomed, I found myself reflecting on my past more often. Each time I thought about Sarah, it was no longer with a sense of bitterness or anger, but rather as a chapter in my life that had ultimately led me to where I was now. I learned that I was capable of resilience, that I could rebuild from the ashes of heartbreak. It was empowering to recognize that I had the strength to move forward, to let go of what no longer served me. One evening, while sitting on my balcony and watching the sunset, I took a moment to reflect on everything that had transpired. I felt grateful for the experiences that had shaped me, both the good and the bad. I had learned valuable lessons about trust, self-worth, and the importance of surrounding myself with genuine people. I had come to appreciate the strength that lay within me, the ability to rise from the depths of despair and create a life filled with joy and purpose. As I continued to build my life, I also discovered the importance of setting healthy boundaries. I learned to communicate my needs and desires openly, to cultivate relationships that were built on mutual respect and understanding. I realized that I couldn't allow the mistakes of my past to cast a shadow over my future. I owed it to myself to embrace love, happiness, and authenticity. Over time, I found a balance between moving on and honoring my past. I would always carry the lessons learned from my marriage with me, but I refused to let them define who I was. I was no longer just a victim of betrayal. I was a survivor, a thriver, and I was ready to embrace life wholeheartedly. Looking back, I realized that Sarah's infidelity had sparked a transformation within me. It had forced me to confront my own insecurities, desires, and the very essence of what I wanted from life. I was grateful for the friendships I had rekindled, the new ones I had formed, and the love I had discovered in myself that I had long forgotten. As I closed that chapter of my life, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. I had survived the storm and emerged stronger, wiser, and more in tune with my true self. The journey was far from over, but I was excited for what lay ahead. I now understood that life had its twists and turns, but I was ready to face them head-on. In the end, I had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that my happiness was ultimately in my own hands. I was ready to embrace love, adventure, and every possibility that life had to offer. I had reclaimed my narrative, and I was determined to write the next chapter with intention and joy.